Chapter 8. Breakpoint. The vault doors groaned like a sinking ship as the emergency blast seals gave way one by one. Heat washed through the chamber in slow breaths from the core below, carrying the copper-sweet tang of burnt circuitry and blood. Steve's left glove pulsed under the dim alarm glow, the circuits inside it shining through hairline cracks like veins of lightning trapped beneath skin. His forearm throbbed where the bandage bit against the burn. Vance eased forward until he was a half step ahead of Steve, broad frame angled to take the first hit. The plasma scorch across his chest plate bled dull red light with every rise and fall of his breath. "They're through the upper locks," he said, voice ground down to gravel. "2 squads at least." "3, Kira corrected, eye darting between the fractured lens of her wrist rig and the red triangles dropping into position along the catwalks. "And they're not probing. They're setting up a choke." Her cracked knee plate scraped rock when she shifted. She didn't look at the injury. She didn't have time. Cole rolled his shoulder where the armor was caved, tested his cybernetic arm. The fingers jittered and threw sparks, but the elbow pistons still answered him with a reluctant whine. "Give me a lane," he said. "I'll make it a hallway." Nora worked a dying console like a surgeon with a failing heart. Her cracked lens pulsed dim crimson as she overrode fail-safes, then overrode her overrides. Lines of alien code flowed in vertical rivers across glass and metal, glyphs that bent the room's light when they shifted. "The security mesh isn't responding to my commands," she said, calm only because she refused the other option. "It isn't broken. It's obeying something else." Hex wiped the blood streak crusting his temple and dragged a cable toward a junction plate, flinching as his neural implant hiccuped. "Say it," he muttered. "Say the quiet part." "The Nameless," Nora said. "It's inside the lattice." A deep note rose under them like the throat clearing of a giant. The Blackstar core lifted from its cradle, an obsidian prism covered in shifting silver script. Air thickened, the way a storm feels when the pressure drops. Steve felt it in his teeth. The vault's main blast door slammed open. Marcus Kane walked through the smoke as if it were a curtain, hands at his sides, head tilted a degree to study the room like he was already drafting its autopsy. Dust and smoke couldn't stain the place his eyes held. He stopped within speaking distance and didn't raise his voice. "Step away from the interface, Alden." Steve's jaw locked. He could feel the old instinct, the one that told him to obey orders that weren't clean, to move because some other man said to. He stood his ground instead. "You don't own this." Marcus took another step. "I don't own it. I shepherd it. You were always the one meant to open the door." White-blue threads of energy extended from the prism, searching, then found the circuits in Steve's glove and sank into them with a soft, inevitable click. Heat touched bone. He heard himself take a breath he didn't mean to take. "Kill their lights," Marcus said over his shoulder. The catwalk squads opened fire. Plasma bolts hissed through the vault like nails in a hurricane. Cole drove his body into the brunt of the barrage and sent a counterblast that tore a railing loose and dumped 2 soldiers into the darkness. Kira A.'s last drone jumped from her back like a startled bird and streaked for a sniper position, its shattered eye recording everything until a lucky shot turned it into shrapnel and light. Hex thumbed a pulse charge and hurled it into a cluster of rifles. Their barrels went dead, then glowed as the backwash cooked their casings. Nora called, "Steve, look at me." He did, and the crack in her lens caught his reflection in a thin red crescent. "The core will map to whatever you believe you are. Hold your mind or it will fill you with something else." "What is something else?" Hex asked without looking up. "The protocol's idea of a person," Nora said. "A perfect user." Vance shifted his weight to give Steve more cover, shoulders squared to Kane, like he'd been waiting years to stand in this exact place. "Keep your heart rate steady," he said quietly. "Ignore the pictures it feeds you. They're not truth, they're bait." A flicker in the vault's light. Then another. Then the whole chamber shuddered like a film missing frames as the core's scripts ran. Steve tasted ozone and ash. The prism's hum deepened into a bone vibration. A memory slid behind his eyes without permission. A desert of white ash. A moon shattered and hanging 20 feet overhead. A black cube turning slowly in the center of its own gravity, whispering his name not with sound, but with pressure. We are not strangers. The words weren't words. They were understanding poured into the space where language usually goes. Cole jerked as a bolt clipped his shoulder and re-angled his stance to shield Nora and Hex. "Whatever sermon it's selling," he grunted. "Send it back postage due." Marcus drew nearer, unhurried, a man for whom speed was beneath dignity. He nodded toward the prism. "You see it, don't you? The place where this all began. Your mind remembers. Let it finish remembering." His ice-blue eyes were too calm. "When it locks, we can end this." Kira slid to Steve's other side, breathing hard. Her visor threw fractured reflections of the prism. "Don't listen," she said. "I know what it sounds like when you want to. That's how it gets you." The thread swollen from the prism burrowed deeper into the glove's circuits, and for a second, Steve felt the distinct impression of a hand closing over his own. Not human, not cold, simply other. He braced against the console, and the console answered him with a ripple of light that spread across its surface like something alive waking. Nora's hands danced. She threaded a blocker between two streams of code, rerouted a ground, spiked the prism's resonance by a fraction. The glyphs stuttered. "I can give you seconds," she said. "No more." Hex popped from cover, slid into another junction, and jammed a cable into place. "I can give you 6 more volts than God meant this board to hold," he said, and hit a switch. Somewhere deep, something snarled like an animal. A shock wave rippled outward and rolled over the room. Weapons flickered. The alarms guttered. The vault fell into an anesthesia quiet where every noise is a decision. The prism glowed, bright as a forge. "We are ready," the pressure said. "You are ready." Steve was aware of his heartbeat because the glove made it visible, blue-white pulses rippling tiny distances under skin. He was aware of the old photo in his apartment. Mia's smile not just at him, but around something beyond the frame. He was aware of the night smell in New Avalon's alleys, smog wet with neon, when he'd first started to suspect his life had seams someone else had sown. "Steve," Marcus said very softly. "Open the door." Vance lifted his weapon off the floor by a fraction, a proof that he could still move if this went the way guns go. "Don't." The prism's glyphs flared. Blue filaments snapped out and touched everything in the room that ran on power. Rifles died in men's hands. Displays went to black. The ventilation's breath stopped. For half a heartbeat, the vault was only people, metal, and a humming stone. "The Nameless is free." The voice wasn't sound. It landed on bone and memory. It fell into the spaces between breaths and became part of the structure of breathing. Something in the dark beyond the prism moved. A tall latticework like light assembled into an approximation of a body, and the air around it bent slightly as if gravity were considering. It didn't advance. It looked, and attention had weight. Hex whispered, "Oh, hell." Kira whispered, "Don't look at it too long." Nora whispered nothing at all. Her hands moved because hands can move when mouths are unable. Marcus took one step closer to the figure and stopped like a man at an altar. "At last," he said. The figure didn't turn toward him. It turned its attention toward Steve and tilted its head in a motion human enough to register and wrong enough to sting. What lived behind Steve's eyes stirred. The desert's wind rose. A thin blue line ran along a crack in a floating piece of moon and lit it from within. "Join us," the pressure murmured. "Finish the work." The vault's sealed access screamed and bulged inward. Metal tore out like a tooth. A half-dozen rebels forced it open with plasma cutters and a battering ram rigged from a mining strut. They spilled into the room with weapons raised and stances wide and ran straight into a thing their training had not contained. The figure glanced. The rebels' eyes filmed white, as if frost grew there from the inside, and they stopped mid-step, chests still lifting and falling in shallow, fast breaths. Steve took a half-step toward them. Vance caught his shoulder. "You can't help them yet," he said. "You can help us. Who are you?" Steve swallowed. The glove hummed in resonance with the prism. He looked at the figure and felt the weight of its attention like a hand on the back of his neck, guiding, not forcing. The words came out before he could decide them. "I'm Steve Alden," he said, "and I don't belong to you." Light flickered through the latticework as if a thought had misfired. The figure didn't step back. It didn't step closer. It waited, attention falling on the bandaged forearm like it remembered the burn before he did. "We remember you," it said without saying. "You remember us." Marcus exhaled through his nose, not quite a sigh. "You will," he said. He raised his hand. Catwalk squads reset their grips on weapons that didn't answer, and still they adjusted, as if preparation were an answer in itself. "Stand down, Alden." Steve lifted his palm. The glove answered. The prism brightened. Every tense muscle in the room drew tighter and waited for a decision. He made one. The glove's circuits flared. The prism sang. For an instant, the vault's weight shifted, like a building catching itself. The figure's attention moved not away, but sideways, enough to let Nora shove a breaker across and Hex dump a surge into a channel that was never designed to drink it. The vault's lights crashed on in staggered bands, and with them, every person jerked like marionettes waking. "Now!" Vance said, and the command squads rushed, and Cole turned the first two into heat and light, and Kira hauled Steve, and Hex yanked a cable out with his teeth when his hand wouldn't listen, because the implant had taken the moment to sneeze sparks. And Nora held one hand on the console to keep the door she'd opened from closing while she fired with the other. They moved, not because they thought it would work, but because moving was the only thing left, besides not. At the threshold, Steve glanced back. The figure stood between the prism and Kane. Attention returned to him with no change in expression, because you need a face to have an expression, and it had assembled something else. It lifted a hand of angles and light. The glove whispered along his bones as if answering an old practiced signal. "We are not strangers," the pressure said again. We began together. Steve turned and ran through the door Nora had forced. Cold air grabbed his lungs. The passage beyond was narrow and stank of rust and old water. The door banged once behind them like a tired heart, then went still. They didn't stop moving until the hum of the prism was a rumor, and the vault had become part of the geography of things they couldn't fix from here. When they finally found a pocket with cover and air that didn't taste like melted metal, Steve braced his back against stone and let the shiver work through his hands. The glove pulsed once, twice, then fell quiet as if listening with him. No one spoke. Breaths were inventory. Kira checked her knee and didn't swear out loud, which meant it was bad. Cole flexed his cybernetic hand until the servos quit grinding, then quit flexing because the servos still ground. Hex pressed a cloth to his temple until the red on it was more cloth than not. His implant flickered like a star behind clouds. Nora leaned her head back against the wall and closed her eyes, while her hands continued to work because they had learned they could. Vance's good eye dimmed a notch as the flicker steadied. "We didn't lose yet," he said, which meant he thought they might. Steve looked at his palm. The circuits didn't glow. He still felt the pressure like an echo of a word. "We are free," it said, but quietly now, like someone speaking in another room. He exhaled and looked up at the small blue strip of light along the passage ceiling that meant somewhere there were still emergency systems running. "Then we move before it gets better at being free," he said. We need a way out that doesn't go through them. Hex licked dry lips and tried a smile that almost worked. Good news, he said. I know all the bad ways out. Nora opened her eyes. And I know where it will go next, she said. It'll need bandwidth, a spine. The city grid is a throat. The lunar uplink is a mouth. If it reaches either, it talks to the rest of the world, Kira finished, and the rest of the world listens. Steve pushed off the wall. Then we cut off its breath. Behind them, very far away and still too close, something deep shifted again. It didn't sound like machinery anymore. They moved. End chapter 8.